Monday?
I just
Actually.
except for the like
Oh, doesn't bother me that. Nope. Sun's out.
my whole thing.
Sun's fun.
And they're tanning.
So,
Should, you know. Oh, sorry.
is this yours?
So we're just going right into pledge then.
That's what they do.
Just introduce, I think.
Yeah, introduction to the pledge.
Yeah.
Well, we got pledge on here again, because they lead the pledge. Yeah.
No, I mean, I think you just introduce and then they, right? Or you can,
Yeah. Well, I'll have Michelle.
Michelle, and then-
Okay, yes, yes.
It was here without me.
Yeah, let's. It's so great.
Do we have public comments? Let me grab the public comment sheet and get the ones that are empty too. The empty ones too.
two vote.
Okay. Okay, we good? Okay. I'm gonna have Mrs. Schmidt introduce you.
Sure. So I've got Allie here, and I've got Kaylee, they're both sixth graders, and I asked them to come tonight because they are just awesome student leaders. We have asked them to do a few things above and beyond, and such as they had to lead our fifth graders the other night in tours, which wasn't the easiest job, but they held it together and became calm. They were kind of cute because they're like, oh my goodness. But they did a great job, and I know Kaylee helped out with our dinner the other night. She served, and I was just so impressed with all of them. So thank you guys for coming tonight. So we're gonna turn it over to you. Say the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, well, I'm not sure, technology is usually never my friend, so we'll just kind of go with this. It seems like I was just here updating you guys, and it has been a busy, last couple of months at North Shore Middle School. So I'm gonna start out with, on January 8th, our fifth and sixth graders and our seventh and eighth graders, competed at the regional math meet at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater, and both teams took first place in their division. We're so very, very proud of all of them. In addition to that, several individual awards, you'll see them there. Elizabeth took first place individually in the 8th grade score. Mason Kay took first place individually in the 7th grade score. Ryan took second place individually in the 7th grade score. Tommy took first place in the individual 6th grade score. Addison took second place in the individual 6th grade score, and Jackson took first place in the individual 5th grade score. So we're very, very proud of our students and our math coach, Patty Eckerman. She coaches them and does a great job. And they will be competing at the state math meet. The 7th and 8th graders will be competing May 21st at Madison College. And the 5th and 6th graders will be competing on May 23rd at Edgewater College in Madison. So very excited.
Is it doing anything for you?
No.
I texted Chris.
Okay.
I
I'm just gonna keep talking, so maybe the slides will catch up with me. Student council has been busy. I know there was a glow dance here for the foundation on Friday night, but we had one in January and they had a blast. And again, they were out there dancing, having a great time. We've had a couple of spirit days. We had pajama day, we had pink and heart day. Our little St. Patrick's Day is coming up. So just again, trying to keep things, keep kids excited about coming to school, some of those fun offerings. On February 7th, we had Career Day, and I'd like to thank Chris. Chris came and presented, and Jake came and presented. We had 15 presenters. We have an ACP committee at school that's kind of led by our school counselor, Chelsea Windle, and we have several teachers on that team. And really work to get 15 different presenters here. Again, trying to help our students make that connection between, so many times you hear, why do I have to learn this? Why are we doing this? So making that connection between what they're doing and that, yeah, someday there is a connection here. And we had such a nice variety of presenters. We had Chris, we had some engineers, Jake is an engineer, we had a few engineers, we had Jean from Byrne that did a workout with the kids, we had a physical therapist, Ann and Gracie came to talk about service dogs, we had an interior designer, we had a policeman, we had an interpreter, so we had a big variety of things, and the kids really, really enjoyed it, and so did the adults.
Michelle, Chris said the only thing that you could do is try to reboot if you wanted.
Okay. Do you want me to reboot, or are you okay with me just talking?
Whichever you prefer.
Your computers. Let's try this.
I should have kept the sixth graders here, they probably could have figured it out. Thanks, Rich.
Let's just see if it's interactive.
So Healthcare Expo, right where I was leaving off, on March 5th, we had about 40 8th graders that took advantage of going to the Healthcare Expo that was held at Waukesha County Technical College. And that was sponsored by the Waukesha County Business Alliance and local healthcare providers, and the kids had, again, a great time. Another way to see like, oh, here are some careers that I might be interested. I never knew that some of these careers existed. So again, they learned about patient care, sports medicine, information technology, behavioral health, nutrition, nursing, dentist, pharmacy, emergency care. They had a great time, and I got a lot of positive feedback from them. And a lot of them came back wearing their little operational hats. We just wrapped up our boys basketball season. Kudos to all of our student athletes. These pictures happen to be of our 8th graders. 8th grade right won their consolation bracket, and they were so excited. It was so fun to watch them. They ended up in 3rd place overall. And then Mr. Bento's team made it to the championship round, and although they came in 2nd, I have to give a hats off to both of these teams. You know, sometimes it gets competitive out there, and they were always willing to like pick up a student from the other team. I didn't hear any barking at the refs. They were very polite. They were classy, and that was something that made me proud. Even though they might not have physically won, they won. And it was a great turnout from our community, parents, grandparents, and just our school population, we had a lot of kids in the audience. Another annual event that we have that is very popular and a great community night is our little night dinner concert. And we had that on February 28th. Angela, the 7th and 8th grade bands played, the 7th and 8th grade choirs sang, as well as the chamber choir. And beforehand we had dinner, we had lasagna. Our 6th grade students waited on us, they did a great job. And again, just a really nice night of community, grandparents, community members, and it's a fundraiser for our music department, so it's a lot of fun. And the theme was, they were honoring the divas, so a few Taylor Swift songs in there. We just had our 5th grade, 6th grade transition night. We had a nice turnout for that. Again, our 5th grade students learn what is it really like to be a 6th grader, and they hear it from our 6th graders, and they will tell them. Before that, we always have them up for lunch the day before to get them excited, and they love our lunch. They rave about our lunch. So that's a lot of fun. Parents get to learn a little bit about the developmental needs of 6th graders because your kids do change as you all know as they go through middle school. Parents learn about the different levels of math that we have at North Shore. Kim Soik did a scientific experiment with the kids. And just overall, it's just a nice night. The kids learn about our electives and the things that we offer at North Shore. And then I'm sure you know, Jim Bento was just nominated for a Life Changer Award. And again, we have so many great teachers at North Shore Middle School, and Jim is definitely very deserving of this nomination. He was very surprised. It was exciting. We had a little cake for him on Friday, and the kids were very excited. And he was nominated by a former student who he inspired. And if you ever go in Jim's classroom, he will take students who really don't have any confidence or possibly any interest in math, and by the end of the year, they have both. So hats off to Mr. Bento, and hopefully we can support him so that he ends up being an award winner. And just on Friday, we had 8 8th graders who participated in the Fluid Power in Action Challenge at Waukesha County Technical College, and that is sponsored by Price Engineering in Heartland. And one of our teams took 3rd place out of 38 teams, so we were very excited about that. They went in February and they got the kit, they heard about the challenge, and then they had time between then and last Friday to get their project together and compete and be judged. So that was a great day for them. And then beyond all those other things, we're still heavily invested in staff professional development at North Shore. In January, we always have a data retreat where we take a look after we've done our MAPS data in the middle of the year, and we do our middle of the year running records. We take that data and we compare it to what does that data look like from September. We triangulate the data and we tweak our individual student action plans. So are kids progressing the way we are hoping they're progressing? Do we need to add more challenges for certain students? Do we need to tweak the interventions that we're doing on the students who are receiving those interventions? We also, I don't know if you're aware of this, we have several teachers, Morgan Johnson, Julie Ryan, and Jennifer Klang, they're on our literacy team. They are attending the CISA 6 Struggling Reader Professional Development along with Sarah Blankenheim, our literacy coach, and myself. That has been a really nice addition to our professional development. It's really honing in on struggling readers and what we can do for struggling readers. And one of our big ahas was background knowledge plays such a huge part. And the data around kids who have background knowledge versus kids that don't have strong background knowledge it was really an eye-opener for us. So it's a mix of us going up to Fond du Lac for some professional development, and then a coach comes here. The coach was just here the other day. So we create action plans, and she comes down here and she gives us feedback on how those plans are going. And then Patty Eckerman is our district math coach, but at North Shore Middle School, we also work with Sarah Brown from the Wisconsin Mathematics Institute. And she has done an amazing job working with our math team and pushing them forward and making sure that they continually engaged in best practice around mathematics. Because again, our mantra at North Shore is we've never arrived. We can constantly learn, we can constantly get better. And finally, upcoming events at North Shore, we've got a Spread the Word signing day tomorrow. The director of the Special Olympics is coming here tomorrow to be part of our signing day. We're very excited about that. And for those of you who don't know what a Spread the Word Day is, it's really the kids making a commitment that they're going to be respectful to everyone, regardless of differences. Friday, March 15th, we've got our Green and Gold Day, our Spirit Day. Forward testing begins. I can't believe it's already that time of year, but it is. And it's always right before spring break starts. I don't know why DPI does that, but they do. Student Council is going to be sponsoring some March Madness watch parties. They're gonna begin Tuesday, March 19th. But again, we've got spring break, so that might put a little crank in it. We've got spring break, then forward testing resumes for grades 6 through 8. And at the end of April, we've got our middle school musical coming up. So again, lots going on at North Shore. It's been a busy last couple months and it's gonna be a busy rest of the school year. So that's what we've got going on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we're moving on to public comment. Just as a reminder, we've got 3 minutes, or each of you has 3 minutes. Please do not address individual board members, and you are open to comment on anything. It does not have to be on the agenda. First up is Matt.
Thanks. My name is Matt Schwab. I just want to comment on 2 things that came up on the last school board meeting. First, I appreciate your consideration of kind of increased opportunities for the public to speak in forums, and Chris's work in talking about what has and has not worked at Arrowhead. I share that interest in trying getting more opportunities for the public to kind of communicate. I think some people aren't necessarily comfortable speaking in this type of environment. Excuse me, but I've also shared the experience that Chris said of showing up at Arrowhead where they have that half hour before the meeting and you kind of sit around for 30 minutes because nobody wants to talk. So one suggestion might be to consider a spring and a fall listening session. Spring could be, you know, what feedback do you have from the school year, things of that nature. Consider it over the summer. In the fall, report back on what you did, hear about new parents are concerned about for the next school year. Excuse me. The second thing I want to talk about is the library and the enhancement that's happening at Hartland North. I mean, kudos, I was very impressed with the presentation, and I appreciate you guys approving that. One thing I would encourage you to do is to closely track the costs we spend on that, and not just the hard costs in terms of buying things, but also the costs in terms of internal resources that are providing free, quote unquote, free labor. I do a lot of insurance claims work where we go back and track construction projects, and if you get 6, 12, 18 months behind, you kind of forget what those costs were. It's going to be important if we ever have to go to the community for an extraordinary ask from financials to show what we have done within our budget and not had to ask the community for, should we have that ask. So I'd encourage you to track that cost closely and maybe look back at the last 3 or 4 years, and if there have been other kind of major capital expenditures, keep a running list of those, because if we ever have to go to the community, you want to be able to say, look, we haven't had an ask before and we've done X, Y, and Z, but here we are today and we need the new thing. So encourage those things.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Neil?
Hi, not as robust as Matt's comments, but I was looking through the notes. I noticed a typo in one of the policies that you're gonna approve via consent agenda, under the alternative section for the bus route policy. In number 3, it says existing district bus route instead of bus route. So wanted to let you know as I was looking at that. And also I don't know if this is where it's supposed to go or not, but in that bus policy, there was nothing that was discussed at the last meeting. I know we weren't putting in any new policy, but there still is nothing out there about it, even a pay to ride option in that bus policy. So I don't know what policy we're charging parents on, but it wasn't in the policy that you're about to approve via consent agenda tonight. There's another policy that's being approved by consent agenda about termination and resignation for support staff. And it says that most of that policy is struck through, and it's at the option of the district to terminate or accept resignations, but doesn't really specify who, if that's a superintendent, if that's the board, if that's both, if that's who that is, so I thought that was ambiguous. And then the last comment I had in what is going to be upcoming today on the library plan, it talks about weeding out books. And I just wanted to make sure if we're weeding books out, where those books are going, and hopefully they're going to someplace that is needed. So those are my comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it for public comment. We're gonna move on to new business. And Jake is going to present stuff for the landscapes.
Yep, I'll go with that.
Okay.
So I'll kind of speak and kind of introduce and get this set up for him, because we kind of pre-set. Jake and I have met a couple times, and Jake has done a lot of work to, Chris was doing this one, right? So, or, away, he's out there. He's managing it in the office. So he's met with the principals, he's met with teachers, we've met a couple times. We did adjust the MOU just to kind of reflect what we're actually doing out there. And then we went through all of these incredible ideas and plans for the 3 schools and what they look like. And we kind of simplified it and brought it down to what we're just gonna do this year. And then I think he's got in here included some future projects and ideas that are up for discussion next spring, because that's what we do every spring, is have the conversation. We're super excited about the work that they're planning on doing and all of the beautification and opportunities to have our children learn about different plants and systems. So take it away.
Thank you. And I want to say first off, thank you to Tina, Amy, the rest of the admin, principals, the teachers, for working with us, especially, right, this is new to us, new to the district, so we're figuring things out, but we're really excited about this. Just a really quick reminder, kind of who we are. So Landscapes for the Future is a nonprofit, and we're focused on creating, maintaining, and preserving beautiful, educational, and beneficial outdoor areas. There's 5 board members in our organization right now. Mike Calise is also here tonight. He's an English teacher, high school English teacher, has 2 kids in the district in another year or 2, or 3rd. And he's our English major, so he does all the writing. And then we have Courtney Marshallak, Jeff Rick, and John Close as well, both most of them parents or former parents of kids in the district. And we are, well, I'll skip. This is our QR code that takes us to a donation page. So, wink, wink, yeah, we are officially a 501c3 now. So this is a few of our wins over the last year as we've, again, got things going. So we are officially a 501c3 nonprofit. We've acquired our liability insurance so we can have our events in the correct way with the district. And we've also done a lot of things in a less formal, kind of smaller fashion over the last year. Cared for the HLEF beautification plants that were planted last spring, which, if all of you remember, last summer was very dry and very hot, so it was a lot of watering. Most of those volunteer hours were watering, just kind of trying to keep things alive. And we've gotten quite a few donations already from the Gall family and Miss Donor without actually asking for donations yet. So, which is awesome because with our plans that we'll be showing you, we're gonna need some money, but we're well on our way. This is just a quick photograph or two of some work that we've already done with the district. So this was this fall, where we helped the teachers with some education at South doing their, I think it's like an ecology unit, where we did propagating of native plants, both by seed and division. And they helped us by creating lots more plants, many of which will be ready for this spring. So we'll be using those to plant out and getting the kids involved with helping at their schools. So many more things like that to come. In the interest of time, I'm gonna kind of skip through these a little fast, but please feel free to stop me and ask questions. Or it should all be in the packet, I think, so you can always reference it and ask later. But we'll kind of go school by school, starting with Hartland North, I guess going from north to south. So this is the main sign at Hartland North, and one example of some things that we've already been doing there. So on the left is a picture from maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And then on the right was, so I love planting, but I often forget to take pictures. So that picture is actually from last year, but you can see some of the things that we've already been doing in adding plants, adding season-specific decorations, if you will. And we're gonna continue to do that. So a lot of the entrances to the buildings will be adding more plants, cleaning things up, that type of thing. And I'll be honest, my wife is rearing to go with a pressure washer on that side. We live right next to there, so we gotta see it. Yeah, and again, the main entrance here, adding even more plants, extending the bed to hopefully provide some space for like Mr. Kreif and the students to maybe add some sculptures, some artwork, because although this year's been a little different, most of the time we have several months where there's not too much green out there, so it's nice to have some color from other things and highlight the students' skills. We're continuing to refresh the butterfly garden that's there at North. We'll be adding some type of book walk with a native plant book theme. We'll be adding some screening for some of the areas where there's a lot of parent traffic and there's some less than aesthetically pleasing mechanical boxes and things. And then at the 5K entrance, there were trees planted last spring with the HLA beautification. We'll be creating a bed that kind of combines that area and then adding some plants by the door as well. This is one of the areas like at the 4K entrance as well, where a lot of parents will be standing there waiting for kids, both at pick up and drop off. And so having something of interest there is what we'll be doing. So Hartland South. This, for those of you that aren't used to looking at Google Maps at the buildings, this is right by the main entrance, which is over here. The main entrance to the parking lot is over in this direction. So we'll be refreshing the bed in that main entrance area, increasing the size of it as well, adding some new picnic benches, which the teachers make a lot of use of, especially during lunch hour when the weather's nice. And yeah, just adding more plants for both the teachers, the parents, and the students to enjoy. Yeah, so that's hopefully what it looks like. With everything blooming all at once, magically. And then similarly, closer to the entrance, so again, this is, as you're driving up, this is the main entrance. Those are the windows by the office areas. So replacing some of the bushes in those areas that have kind of run their course and aren't as happy, and spruce some things. Yes, and we'll be adding, so this is the main carpool entrance, I guess you'd call it. where a lot of the parents that are dropping off or picking up, they kind of queue up through there. A lot of the trees over there are kind of, again, running their course of their life. And so some of them are going to be needed to be replaced, or at least getting things started so that in a few years, if they need to be taken out, that there's something in their place to provide some screening to the adjacent houses.
Excuse me,
Yes?
real quick suggestion. You made a very important point about like almost everything has a lifespan. And could you use that topic as an educational or to help our teachers or directly educate kids that some things have like a 1 year and annual lifespan, others have perennial, ongoing. Some trees have a 40-year lifespan, like basswood or aspen or something. Others might have a 100-year lifespan. And it's okay to harvest something when it's time to harvest that, so then there's room for new things to replace it.
Yeah, for sure.
Us kids.
Yeah, for sure. We talked about that a little bit when we talked to the 4th and 5th grade classes about, right, sometimes the easiest like seed planting for them to do are annual vegetables, right? But we talked about how what we did was a little different, it's more perennials. We're also hoping that as different trees need to come down, that we can make use of those directly so that the kids can see, right, where that comes from, right? It doesn't all just come from Menards, right, lumberyard. We can actually make use of what we have, because we have a lot of resources on the huge areas that the schools are on, so. Yeah, and then starting a small wildflower prairie in this area at South where there's really no foot traffic through there. Some fruit trees were planted there last year. And so, yeah, again, an area that, doesn't need to be mowed grass because it's really not high traffic, but we can have some beautiful flowers out there. And then finally, the middle school. So this, again, is more of just a picture of some of the work that's already been done. So again, a before picture down there from a few years ago. And then this was this fall after the planting, the HLEF beautification. And so continuing to refresh areas like that. And a big one is right outside the wall here. So we plan to essentially take almost everything out. We did plant things last year in these beds, but a lot of the, again, shrubs are not super happy. If anybody has barberry or has had to deal with it, it's not fun to trim and pick up. So those will be going out and being replaced, but for the most part, the bed sizes on this for now aren't going to be changing. So you'll be seeing that going through a process this spring. Oh, and I should mention, most of these things are going to be happening spring, early summer, but there's a few of them that make more sense to do kind of fall, like the wildflower planting areas. So don't expect all of it done by the end of April. Yeah. And then the entrance sign up here, yeah, there's some arborvitae that kind of growing around it. One was already taken out because for a while you couldn't really see that there was a sign there. So we're going to be refreshing that. And then, yeah, one of the really fun areas, again, to directly impact the students and get them outside, whether they're doing, ecology courses or they're just reading and writing, because, right, kids get antsy inside and it's always nice to get them out when the weather allows. So the current plan is in one of the grade wings to essentially create a seating area with some plantings out there as well, but to provide and also kind of an enclosed space, right, so that they're not wandering as easily, but you can see from where it is adjacent to some doors, it's really easy to get in and out there. And this, again, as Tina mentioned, talking to the teachers, this is one of the things that they would really love to have, so, yeah. And so, again, it's gonna look exactly like that, maybe. And then, again, improving, a suggestion from the teachers, and Mrs. Schmidt, you know, improving the recess areas for the students as well. So the idea is to give them a little bit of a wildflower prairie area with some paths, maybe a bench or two, and other things that, that they can enjoy, so. And then, as Tina mentioned, some possible future projects. So this would be at Hartland North, outside the 4K area, so some sort of outdoor area that the 4Kers could use. You know, the 4Kers, they have little legs, they can't get out to like the woods quite as quickly, and they're only there for a few hours every day, so having a place that they can get to, and probably even other grades as well, not just the 4K, to utilize something, you know, close that they can get out there and get into nature and enjoy it. Just gonna skip through here, and then similar vein at Hartland South, a outdoor seating area as well. This would be in an area right along the carpool path that right now gets a little muddy with the kids. They go through that area to go to the playground, and so, you know, utilizing that space for kind of an outdoor classroom, so. And there's many parents who have had kids go through South, possibility of freshening up the big shed that's over there in some form or fashion. And then, assuming, you know, this seating area at North Shore gets good use and we like the idea of it, we could expand to the other grade wings and add some more features to it as as those things get suggested. So, and then of course lots of weeding and watering and all of that fun stuff. But yeah, and I should mention, I mean, it's in the MOU, and I think most know, but we're gonna be providing this completely free of charge, both volunteer hours and materials. So only ask for help getting volunteers. But yeah, any questions?
I have a couple.
Yeah, please.
Obviously, you know I love all of this stuff, and I'm a huge gardener as well. I think my concern comes from just the overall maintenance, because this is a lot of additional beds, and we obviously already struggle with maintaining what we have. I guess, do you have a plan for that? Because I mean, obviously the implementation is gonna take some time in phases, but.
Yeah, so for the implementation of the projects that we've laid out here, we do have a schedule laid out, but we also will be putting together a more maintenance-focused schedule as well. And I will say, you know, just give us a chance, you know, in the next year or two, and then also like I tried to make it very clear to the principals and anybody else, if you see weeds or anything, especially in areas that, you know, we as parents may not frequent quite as often, you know, you can yell at us, send us a nasty gram. We'll get somebody out there. But and then also though, like I think with some of like South, North Shore, you know, the kids can help out too. Like we might lead the kids, but they're old enough to usually be able to distinguish between a weed and not a weed. With some supervision, but yeah, so we're, yeah, we feel quite confident that we'll be able to handle all the maintenance as well.
Are you guys only doing native flowers, or are you doing additional?
For the
types as
most
well?
part, and part of that is, you know, the fact that natives are they're getting more utilized, but they're fairly underutilized in most residential landscapes and things, and so we wanna use that as an example of how they can be more than just a prairie. I mean, I love prairies and they're beautiful, but they can also be used in more formal settings as well. But where it dictates, so you can see like outside, which is weird, May, whatever we are, 11th, there's like a daffodil blooming already out here. You know, those traditional bulbs are not native, but so some of those things, obviously, many of the fruit trees are not, but for the most part, we're gonna be focusing on native.
What type of fruit trees were planted?
Nectarine, peach, apple, plum, pear. I think that's it, and a few different varieties of those, so.
So there's a lot of maintenance with that, with fruit production and falling and,
Well,
are we sure
We won't.
are the kids gonna, are we gonna have all these kids eating fruit on the playground?
maybe, and, you know, wouldn't that be awesome? Eating fresh fruit, right? So most of the fruit trees are not on the playgrounds, right? And they're all like 2-year-old trees. So they won't be to a size where there will be a lot of stuff for many years. And even then, our plan is to prune them so that they're staying small. They're all dwarf varieties as well.
I'm just thinking about like the lawn service coming in and then having to mow and then there's apples and pears all over the ground and whatnot, how that looks
The
with.
deer will take care of it.
Yeah, the deer.
Well, so there will definitely be some of that as well, but certain other areas, they will be mulched out more, so it'll be less mowing, but,
Okay.
yeah, we'll just have to cross that bridge when we come to it, I guess.
So that fruit tree area is gonna have that prairie,
So like at south,
flower kind of surrounding it, so.
yeah. And similar at like north, all of the fruit trees are closer to the butterfly garden as well. So it's not like they're gonna be right next to a path or anything like that, so. Yeah.
Tom?
I have a couple of questions, as usual. First of all, I remember clearly the first time you made a presentation to our board about a year ago. We were very obviously lacking some natural enhancement and beauty, and you came along and offered to help us resolve that. And I was a little skeptical, like I typically am. But I want to say to you tonight, I'm extremely impressed with what you have done, what you're proposing to do, and I want to thank you very much and how you're doing it. There's always different ways of changing, improving. That's what the dialogue's all about, but overall, you've done an outstanding job, and I want to thank you very much. I do have some suggestions, of course. Number one, with regards to any work that you do at our front site for the district office, right out here on the road.
The one close to the building?
Those of you that have been around for a while, and Val's already smiling because she knows what I'm gonna say. Could we have some conversation, give some thought to having an upgraded sign that might light up, identifying our place? Maybe some graphics, LED that'd be tasteful, indicating there's a dance tonight, there's a board meeting today, things of that nature. Congratulations on the math team accomplishments and things of that nature, which help promote our school district. So if you would just kind of work with staff, so that you're not doing one thing and we're thinking something else, so.
If I can find some plants that can light up, I'll. Yeah, we'll work together on that.
That's all I'm saying, working together, so. You don't do a fine job on the old sign and then all of a sudden we come along with a bright idea, unintended. Yeah. Secondly, also an unresolved issue. Very sadly, year or two ago, we had some vandals that thought it was a good idea at the time, to drive a vehicle up on the baseball diamond and trash the baseball diamond to great expense to our school district to repair and great disrupt to our teams, the students, et cetera. To this date, there has been little to no hardscaping of any kind to provide security, so some misfit doesn't do that again, much less kids are out there playing. So what I'm getting at is that, and I'm not trying to lay this on you, but could you give and work together with our administrative staff on issues like perhaps hardscaping, joint venturing for the funding, so it doesn't all fall on you? Joint venture with us, maybe we as a school district can provide certain things. Maybe we can go to the Hartland-Lakeside Foundation, because they're always looking for worthwhile projects. So it could be a win-win for everybody. The hardscaping, security, even at the little red schoolhouse, there used to be a cyclone fence. That thing just disappeared one fine day, and it's a wide open, tempting grass field, should we put it that way. So I'm trying to be proactive, prevent anymore.
A lot of that, as you've already mentioned, is kind of beyond the scope of us, but Tina and Amy have already brought up some of those concerns and making sure that, right, that's why we work together to make sure that we don't put a bed somewhere that's going to end up with a big boulder,
Exactly.
right, or whatever it is, so.
I see it as a partnership. I mentioned the key players, yourself, the district, maybe the foundation, other groups. And if we work together, we can accomplish some of these goals. You mentioned a couple of times the butterfly. Are these real butterflies, or is it just like a name you decided to give the garden?
That's just the name of the Hartland North kind of area that's in there, the butterfly garden.
I am not being presumptive, but I'm sure you know how to attract butterflies with different types of plants. And I think that'd be extremely educational and a little treat for kids to see.
Yeah.
That's the purpose, right, that's the purpose of the butterfly
The what?
garden. That's the purpose of the butterfly garden, to attract the butterfly, that's why it's.
Well, that's why I asked the question.
Yeah.
Is it just a name, or
No,
can
yeah.
we put in milkweed or stuff like that that would attract?
Yeah, and that's part of the purpose of some of the native, or as part of the native focus as well, is they're more attractive to a lot of the native wildlife, which most of the kids, especially the little kids, like, they can appreciate a flower, but at least with my kids, when they're outside, they're looking for critters, right? Whether it's butterflies or moths or frogs or whatever. So again, that's part of what we're trying to do too, is attract the wildlife. I don't think we'll have trouble
attracting the
deer,
wildlife.
but, yeah.
Years ago, when my kids had gone to school here, we used to have some pets of various kinds, be it a snake, lizard, rabbit, gopher, whatever, and that disappeared. And my point is, I think it's a very worthwhile life lesson to learn responsibility for taking care of something, be it a puppy, gopher, whatever. And if you can't be right there, have somebody else do it for you. So it's a life lesson, taking care of and seeing something that depends on you in various forms, be it a butterfly. I think I saw it at the convention a couple times already, and I don't remember the CISA number, but I think there is one of the school districts, maybe more, that do beekeeping. That's a little intense. There's a reward back for it. It might be just a few small jars of honey, but it's good to learn. The honey doesn't come necessarily from Pick and Save or whatever. This is how it gets to Pick and Save, much like our hamburgers. Another option might be if there's any maple tree. There's a beautiful woods behind Dave's place, maybe the woods to the north of Hartland North would have some maple trees.
Courtney already does that. She goes out and taps the maple
Does
trees
she?
with the students and turns them into syrup every year.
what happens to it?
She turns it into syrup with the kids.
And I think she makes
Awesome.
candy.
Every
She
year.
makes candy.
Mhm.
There was some pancake making.
That's a
I think,
long
couple years
standing
ago.
tradition.
Thank you.
Mhm.
You got what I'm trying to all tie together here, and, I think there's outstanding potential you've already accomplished above and beyond the duty from what you first presented, so again, I wanna thank you for it.
And of course, we're not gonna do everything perfectly, right? So there's gonna be learning, but, we're really excited to do our best, so.
I think I got them all.
Thank you. Amy?
Chris?
Chris?
No. Thank you.
Real quick, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
We used to have students, like high school students or whatever, that I'm gonna regard as part-time seasonal paid summer help. Like some other things that have happened, all of a sudden one fine day we realized, why aren't high school students out there? Oh, we quit that project 2 years ago. Okay. So maybe that's something we could consider. Again, it's an opportunity for young people that wanna work, earn a little money, wanna learn all the things that you can mentor them with. So that would be a contribution that we as a district could do, is reinstate some maintenance. Okay. Thank you very much.
So 2 quick things. So first of all, love it. I'm very excited to see what this looks like. Maybe your children are better than my boys, but I know I can't keep my boys from walking through my gardens at home. So I'm not certain how we're gonna keep the kids from walking through some of these gardens, specifically the garden outside the 5K entrance at North, just thinking about where the parking lot is and the sidewalk is, there's a lot of walking back and forth that occurs through there, potentially. The recess areas at North Shore, and then the wildflower prairie. So I'm just thinking about how we wanna make sure that after you put all the time and effort into that the kids aren't walking through there and trampling on it. I'm sure you're already thinking about.
I would say outside of the realm of Jake and his organization, our principals are here. Do you have any feedback on whether there's that going on currently, or what that would look like from recess or entrance and exit out of those doors?
The wildflower space is actually across the parking lot, between the parking lot and the road on Imperial. So that's pretty low traffic.
Okay.
Rarely do kids go through there because they'd basically be walking between 2 cars. I mean, it would be after school.
Okay.
Because then there would be cars. So, and I think like right now, we don't have any plantings between the recess doors and heading out, but Jake and I have talked about that with regard to how do we manage foot traffic and the impact of that. So we talked about that because he actually helps out on our playground on Fridays. So he sees the impact of the kids on their exit and entrance.
Yeah, those are great questions, and for the most part, right, we're trying to keep them up against the building,
Right.
away from not only kid traffic, but like, snowplow,
Right.
that type of stuff. And yeah, part of this is like, we'll put it in there and we'll see.
Okay.
If they start to get trampled, then we adjust and we'll
Okay.
figure it out. I mean, I'm hopeful that, at the middle school that, they're a little older, a little more responsible.
It hasn't gotten any better with age for my kids, but then again, that could be my kids.
Amy's great. I'm also hopeful that, like Tom had mentioned, that if we can involve the kids in more of the creation of these things, that they see, they get that buy-in to it.
Ownership.
Right, that ownership.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
and like I said, if they don't, then we adjust.
And then my final question, to piggyback on something Tom said, is in light of the vandalism that occurred at the North Woods last month, are these areas all going to be covered by our exterior security cameras?
I think for the most part they are, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, just to make sure that if we have issues like that again.
We can watch.
You should know
Okay.
there is such a thing
Okay.
as a trail cam,
Yep, we've got them.
We have
and the newer ones that have come down tremendously in price that have a cellular connection. I can monitor everything on my cell phone.
on the cams.
Couple hundred miles away.
Yeah, no, that's good. I will add and just, kind of tie this up if that's okay, that, great work, right? Like, this is exciting for our district, for our schools, for our kids, and your mission rings through. So I just want you to know that. I will also say, just for the board and the community to know that there's a beautiful timeline that we're working together on, that we know exactly when and where and how. And we then are able to take our calendar and Greg and Amy, typically it's Greg and Amy and Jake that meet and talk about what that calendar looks like. So exactly what Jake said earlier, when we're talking about, we're doing projects at North, right? And so this area is gonna be dug up. Well, Jake knows, well, I'm not touching that area because it's gonna be dug up. So having that communication and those conversations really goes a long way in the success of this program and this project getting done. So kudos to you for sending that out and building all these pieces. And for those of you who are wondering, there is insurance liability and there is a safety plan in place. So appreciate that work too.
Yeah, John Close is an intelligence officer in the Coast Guard, and so thankfully he knows all of that safety plan stuff. He copied and pasted some stuff, and yeah, so
Perfect.
should be nice and safe, and all that's left is the work.
That's all, no big
That's
deal.
all.
That's all.
Thank you.
Great,
Thank you very much.
Okay, committee reports, and hand it over to Chris for a PPC.
Okay, met on March 1st, and personnel report, nothing was found there, so that was just forwarded on to the board. Most of our discussion centered around the review of the 3,000, 4,000, and 6,000 policies. There were tons. So we went through, Jeffrey and I went through all of the policies and asked questions, provided feedback, and the administration took notes of all of those. We'll make updates and then share that with the entire board. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Tina, but I believe there's going to be a chart indicating
All
what
the
was done.
changes, yep.
Thank you. Then we also covered the just cause policy, and Jeffrey and I decided to move the Neola employment template forward to be reflected in the handbook. So that'll be in the handbook, and then the actual policy will come when we approve the different policies in the 3,000 and 4,000 series. So the actual policy will end up on the books, but when we get through as an entire board, those policies. In the interim, we're suggesting the updates to the handbook. And then on the transportation policy, I did find, thank you Neil, that spot that was in there. We opted to review the portion that Amy pointed out last month, where it indicated the open enrollment fee that was from, I think, 2004 or something. So all we did was suggest a modification to that policy, which is why we missed that part. Because we didn't read, I mean, you skimmed the rest of it, but it was really to update the financial portion of it, which was instead of having a determined amount to say to be determined annually by the board, which is what's in the packet for tonight. And that's it.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Chris?
I don't think any questions, but just a comment that also gets back to a comment that, was it Neil's made during public comments, is that the reason why we made that, one of the reasons we made so many amendments to the transportation policy and pay to ride, is that we took the word policy out of it because we realized looking at the transportation policy didn't specifically mention anything about that. So that's something that will probably get addressed as we go through the new Neola policies.
And I'll be talking about that in my address to the.
Yeah. Okay. Finance Committee report, we met this morning. It was pretty lean and quick. We were in and out in like 20 minutes, I think. Wow. Yeah, we had a nice meeting. Don't you wish you were on finance instead of policy?
I picked the wrong one, we were like 2.5 hours, man.
Oh, we were good this morning. We're just more efficient, Chris.
Too bad.
Yeah, not much to report out because most of it Amy Holly's going to be discussing later. The only thing I wanted to draw your attention to or mention, because I don't remember seeing that on here, is in terms of the school fee updates. With Maureen's actions and efforts, we've recouped about $6,000 of the unpaid school fees through a lot of effort. And the other change that she made that I wanted to highlight is previously families who wanted to apply for free or reduced school fees had to go to the district website to look for the form to fill out. And Maureen is now mailing it out to the families, so it creates a little bit less work for them, makes it a little bit easier for them to access and fill out. And then just as a reminder again, for any unpaid lunch fees, children are not being declined the ability to have lunch. The only change the only thing that occurs is if they're at North Shore has they love the cafeteria, is that there's some very select a la carte items that are typically more expensive, and so those are the only ones that are not available to students if they have an unpaid lunch balance, but otherwise they still have a nice selection of other options to eat. So that was it. Any questions? Oh. Okay.
Okay, great. All right, we're moving on to consent agenda. So we've got the personnel report, the monthly voucher and purchasing card report, school board meeting minutes from February 15th and February 26th, the 000 series bylaws, the 750 transportation policy, 3140, 4140 resignation, termination and non-renewal policies, the district library plan in the 8th grade out-of-state field trip request.
I would like to pull from the consent agenda, please, the bylaws, this is 0 series bylaws. There's a number of questions I had there, and since we can't discuss via email, this is the best forum to discuss those before we vote on that. And then I also had some questions about item G.
Okay.
So I'd like to pull those out of the consent agenda, please. And then can I ask a question about B, so that we don't have to pull it out?
Yeah.
Okay, for the date of retirement and date of resignations, there was nothing in the employee personnel report about liquidation, so I assume that's all for the end of this school year? In the personnel report, we have one person who's retiring and one person who has submitted a resignation, but there was no discussion about liquidation damages. So I wanted to make sure that the date of those were at the end of this school year. Okay. All right.
I'm with you now, thank you.
Yes, no. I could tell from the puzzled looks, I needed to reword my question. Okay. And then I assume that for the retirement, there will be some recognition or celebration of that at the appropriate time. Okay, then I won't say any more. Thank you.
Okay, well, why don't we've pulled these items E and G out, so we can go ahead and discuss them.
Oh, so, question on point of order, do we want to then approve the rest of the consent
Well, we can-
agenda first? And then go back to those, because that's the purpose of pulling them out, right?
Yes. But then we'll have to. I mean, I hate to move them to next.
But we can discuss them now, right? Because we can pull them out of the consent agenda and then
Yeah.
still discuss them because they're still on the agenda.
Right, that's why I'm saying.
And
we
vote on
should-
them.
Right, that's why I'm saying we should discuss them first.
Whichever way you think is best.
Let's discuss.
Okay. There was nothing else that anybody else wanted to pull out? Okay. So let's do the item G first, because I think that's easier. So that is, let me get logged back in here, the new policies that were recommended, 3140 and 4140, dealing with resignation, termination, and non-renewal policies. I didn't see, looking through our current policies, what current policies those are meant to replace. So I couldn't tell what changes or adjustments were made, if any. So do we have a current policy, or is that in the handbook, or where's that coming from?
So let me start with that.
Yeah.
We do not have a current active policy. That's one that we have not had active. but it is one that is a Neola policy. So as we go through this process, as Chris had mentioned, that is something that we will look at. Where this is located is in the employee handbook.
Okay.
And it's a process that's laid out. So the recommendation from PPC came to us that we would update the employee handbook language to reflect the policy that will be granted or given to you in the coming week, that will be approved at the April 11th or April 15th, April
Okay.
15th board meeting.
Okay. So since it's in the handbook and I couldn't find the policy to compare, is this a substantial change from what we currently have outlined in the handbook?
Currently, what we have outlined is a 7-step process that begins with a verbal warning, then a written warning, then a plan of improvement, and then it can, you can grieve it, it's a 7-step
Right.
process
Okay.
of just cause.
This is the okay. Now I'm understanding, because you've talked about the just cause stuff before, okay. And so in the past, when changes have been made to the personnel handbook, the changes were presented back to district employees to get their feedback on it as well before it was actually implemented. I don't know if that is a current procedure or process as well, or if we got feedback from anybody else in the district other than the PPC?
I got feedback from other districts. No other district in the area
Okay.
has this as a
7-step process?
As a standard, as
Okay.
a standard protocol. It's just cause, it's good and sufficient, and it's arbitrary and capricious. So there's 3 different areas in which, but none of those are any longer current because everybody is considered a contracted or at-will employee.
Okay.
And that all kind of changed along with Act 10 and then after that and how things changed. I only know this because of the work that I previously did. We went through this whole process, and when I came here, I was a little taken aback by the just cause process. And when we talk about documentation and we talk about performance, do we have that on file? Well, no. So now we're 18 months out before we have any effect on any kind of change if there needed to be a change. Not that there has to be, but the option that districts' hands are really tied in that concept.
Okay. Yeah, because you had talked about that before, but I didn't tie it together with this policy. Okay. Let's see here. So in terms of statutory administrators, under administrators, it talks about statutory administrators, and it specifically calls out personnel and curriculum. We don't currently, you're wearing the hat of the curriculum director or instructor. Does this bind us to specifically hiring a separate person solely for that purpose?
So when we read through that, it doesn't bind us to hire a separate person, but if ever we needed to, we would be able to because of that policy.
Okay, just wanted to make sure we weren't binding our hands or anything else like that. Okay.
So, a year ago approximately, we used to have that as a employee. We really didn't worry about it a lot, and then when we recruited replacement superintendent, one of the concerns, at least I had, for the district was, is it a state or federal requirement that every school district has a director of curriculum or curriculum director? My understanding is that that person did not necessarily have to be in place or as an employee, but had to be available vis-a-vis a contractual arrangement to review our curriculum to make sure they are in compliance. Is that an appropriate overview of?
Yes, I would say that's accurate, and I would say that's a role that I play. I meet with the admin team weekly, I meet with the coaches weekly. We have a unique situation here that you have math and literacy coaches who really take on the heap of that. We go through all the compliance, we talk about all the reports for DPI, we look at data, we have data retreats, all of the things that go through that process.
So we need to have that process, we need to use that process for, it doesn't have to be an employee, as I think we were previously led to believe.
Superintendents oftentimes in smaller districts across the state wear both hats, whether it's a hat of curriculum and superintendent, whether it's principal and superintendent, whether it's finance and superintendent, whatever it may be.
That helps a lot to have that clarified. Thank you, Brent.
Okay, almost done. Sorry, I like to understand things,
No,
I
yeah,
apologize. So looking at policy 3140 subsection C, where it talks exempt professional personnel with no contractual or statutory coverage, they said that they are, what was my question there? Shoot. I had down here, how long are our current letters of intent to employ?
A letter of intent is 1 year for
Okay.
each school year. Non-admin contract staff received a contract each year, and now going forward, per previous action, they will be exempt and will receive the letter in June at the same time as
Okay.
teachers and support staff.
Okay. And then my concern, just thinking through that, not being in HR or hiring folks, is are we concerned about losing good employees because they're worried about getting that letter of intent in June? But I guess if we already do that for our teachers, it's gonna be the same process across the board for all employees.
That is correct, and that truly
Okay.
only affects 5 people, 5 or 6.
Okay.
And they are well aware, we already had the conversation with those
Okay.
employees, and it's all
Okay.
been.
Okay. And then the same thing with policy 4140 with at-will employees. Okay. So really just the same kind of process.
Yeah, one is for support staff, the 33,000 series is support, and the 4,000 series are certified, or vice versa.
Vice versa, okay. No, that answers my questions there. Thank you. Okay. We're good on G.
Okay. Moving on.
I'm moving on. So I just keep remembering that the most important thing the board does is set policy. So I read through the policies, and since I'm not on PPC committee and I can't send emails to other board members to discuss things outside the board meeting, I have questions. So I'm just gonna dive in and go through the list of board policy. So when we look at Neola policy.
Which number are you on?
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you.
Oh, I'm sorry, which agenda?
Agenda item, it's under consent agenda, so 12E.
Thank you.
Okay. So Neola policy 112 on the purpose. Our existing policy that correlates with that is 110, which also includes mission and vision. So I think that's important work to not lose, because prior administrators and boards spent a lot of time coming up with the mission and vision of the district. So will that information still be communicated someplace else in the district so we don't lose that?
Yes, it's in a separate section, so I believe it's in the 1,000s.
Okay,
I can check.
okay. Because I don't have access to those other ones, so I can't look those up. Okay. You don't necessarily have to find it to me, to prove it to me tonight, as long as we know that we're not
Yeah,
gonna
no,
lose
we're
that.
not.
I'll take you on your word for that. Okay. Let's see here. Next one, I had a question on, maybe it was 123, philosophy of the board that includes, I was wondering if we wanted to include the mission and vision there. But if you're telling me it's gonna be in the 1,000 series, maybe we don't need to include it under policy 123?
Yeah, we can take a look at that, that's because
Let me get back here to 123 again.
sorry, this is
No.
hard to try to quickly find. It's in the 2000s, 2105,
Okay,
mission statement of the district, and then it continues on to all of those areas.
including, okay, so we won't lose that in the transition.
No.
Okay, excellent. Next one I had a question on was 131.1, on bylaws and policies. So, and this kind of gets back to something that I discussed with you at our bi-weekly meeting, Tina, was that, it used to be standard practice that all things were brought to the board twice. So the first time was just for discussion and the second time was for discussion and decision. And our current policy states that there has to be 2 readings prior to being voted on, as does the Neola policy 131.1. And it specifically says that it has to be proposed at 1 meeting and then noted on the second meeting to actually be voted on. And so what I was wondering is, per Neola definitions, does a committee meeting actually count as a board meeting? Because the policy says board meeting.
So I think we take it to mean that. Certainly if the board wants to do something different with that, everything from obviously, the work that I've done, it's the committee looks at it and it's taken to the board approves it, and then it's in. Because the conflict with that is, you have it in committee, right? So that's one month. You take it the next month to the first board meeting. You take it the next month to the next board meeting. You're 3 months out before a policy gets implemented. And sometimes, as you know, there are times when we need a policy implemented pretty quickly. So this is a process that we're all going through. We will go through a final, what do you call that, like a final approval of the whole series, once it's all said and done, as kind of like just a final stamp of approval. We're going through it this way, I think, because there are so many missing from the WASB that we have to have some of these policies in place. And so in my mind, yes, it's policy, then it comes to the board, that's its second reading. We're taking those policies and implementing them, especially in the absence of the WASB policies, and then going through a full adoption in probably June.
I have a concern with that. I don't regard a committee meeting as a board meeting. For a variety of reasons.
Yeah, and it does stay in here. Yeah, provided the proposed adoption amendment or repeal should have been proposed at a previous board meeting, and once proposed should have remained on the agenda for each succeeding board meeting. And they talk about in here someplace that there should be discussion that occurs. So, I mean, not all the board members, I mean, we've talked about whether or not we should make all the committees open, have a standard authorization that there might be more than 2 board members there, but Chris made a good point that people tend to sometimes take time off of work to be there. Maybe what I would suggest we consider doing with this policy is saying that if they are minor changes to policy, that the first review can be at PPC, and then they can come directly to the board for approval. But I think specifically, so for example, the transportation policy 750. Okay, I think that's a great example of a policy that we can count the committee review as the first review and then have the board approved under consent agenda, because that was a pretty straightforward change. I think for more complex things like reviewing a whole series of brand new policies, I don't think that having just a single review through committee without the ability for us to then ask questions and discussion and get feedback on it, I think for big changes like that, we should follow a second policy. Follow a second discussion review. I know that's what Arrowhead does with their policies from the meetings that I've attended is, the PPC committee brings through the policies. These are their suggestions for changes. The whole board has a discussion, makes recommendations to change things. It goes back to PPC and then comes back again. So there's a little bit more give and take. I understand it slows the process down, but it allows for input. And this is an area where I think getting feedback from the rest of the board as to what they think about that policy.
Madam Chair, may I?
Yes.
speak? So I think we still have in our disposal the option to make a motion to send it back to committee. So we could continue in the current direction for keeping a sense of urgency and getting these in place. And that if we find either certain ones or a section that requires more in-depth look, a motion could always be made to send it back to committee for the following month. So that gives you the flexibility then to move quickly if necessary, but also slow down if necessary.
So,
Because if you pull it out of the consent as an example, it becomes an independent line item discussion and decision. To where any board member can, through governance, motion to send it back to committee. And as long as the majority agrees, goes back to committee.
so sending it back to committee allows PPC to look at it again, but it doesn't allow for a full board discussion, because the full board's not at PPC.
No, I'm saying you discuss it. You can discuss it here. Sorry, we're not following protocol. I should have asked for permission to speak. Madam Chair, I apologize. Madam Chair, may I respond?
Yes.
So you have the option to discuss it when it's pulled out here at this meeting. And then if it is sent back to committee, the committee can do the work as determined by the board at that initial meeting. That subgroup, that working session digs into the deeper direction as provided by the board, brings that back to a second meeting, to which there could be additional discussion. So again, you're still getting the two discussions. It's just, it allows you the flexibility then to move more quickly if necessary.
Okay, I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know what the order and all this is, but I just, because we're doing the work, so I want to.
Yeah,
From
please.
a clarifying perspective, so what you're saying, because this could really, are you saying that, just bring what we create, right, based on, and here's the sense of urgency on this is because we have employee handbooks and student handbooks that need to align to our board policy, of which they don't, right? So like we have a lot of non-compliant stuff going on. That's the sense of urgency on this. And the work that we're doing is aligning what we currently have in place to go with these Neola policies. It's not to change anything or recreate or build anything new. It's what we have existing to the best that we can to tie these together. And we're doing the work to try to identify our current policies and how they work within these. So is what you're saying is just bring these as they are, like what we bring to PPC currently to the full board reads through all of them, you make your suggestions and have the discussion here, then we take it to PPC and we work through those changes and then bring it back here?
I think that Chris is saying that what we're doing tonight, correct me if I'm wrong, that what we're doing tonight should be what we do, is that we keep it in the consent agenda, and then if a board member has questions, we pull it out and have a discussion and decide if we want to send that specific part back to PPC for further working.
One at a time.
As we need to.
That would be my suggestion, to keep that sense of urgency moving forward.
Yeah, and I think that's
If we do any
fair.
other setup, it will slow us.
Yeah, and then I would just request then that if it does come back from PPC, that that's specifically not on a consent agenda, so in case there needs to be further discussion about what PPC enacted, we can still have that, or it can be in there, and if everything,
If it was straightforward.
we can put it back in the consent, and then if we need to pull it back out, we can pull it back out.
Sure.
Okay.
Quick, that's one of the reasons I tend to not go along with the consent agendas. I like to keep it simple, consistent, and if our policy says that we do 2 presentations by the board, then that's what we should do. I do not believe that the committee kind of substitutes for a board review. And then I have concern about backing out of consent agenda, sending it back, that makes it unnecessarily complicated. That makes sense? Can't we just do it, like, there's 2 readings, if there's a concern, then have further modified by the committee? Doesn't our policy say there should be?
I mean, that's essentially, I think, what we just said.
Yeah.
Right, as long as the board, and without having to pull it out of the consent agenda, that's my concern, and that's one of the reasons I've not automatically agreed with the consent agenda approach.
Well, I think most months, the consent agenda has really worked well, because then because usually what it contains in there is like the personnel report, the monthly voucher, purchasing card report, like really straightforward
I understand.
things.
What does our policy say as far as how many times the board should review proposed policies?
It says 2 readings.
By the board.
By both
Or
our
to the
current, it says at a board meeting, both in the Neola policy and in our current policy.
Okay,
But it sounds like we're counting committee review as one of
That's-
those meetings.
that's
And
my
I think-
perspective as well, and I don't think that that's correct.
So I will take the onus on that because I did this in my previous district. I went through this whole process and that was our process. We did committee work, the committee took the first reading, they took it to the board did exactly what you guys are saying. I have questions on board policy 2142. They talked about it, if we pulled it out, we brought the whole thing back the next time. So that's fine, but we also, I just said to Tiffany, what if we just, to answer to your consent thing, is pull it out and have it be its own thing going forward. These policies can be in their own set, that way it's a discussion. We have the conversation, we go back to PPC, we make the adjustments, we come back to the next board meeting with those changes. Then it's not part of consent. Then it's just its
That
own
solves
thing.
the problem, as long
Yeah.
as there's 2 board reviews.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that too, like I'm good with that process.
Chris?
Sure.
Okay,
So that doesn't require any change to the Neola policy, because the policy already requires 2 reviews. So what we're just saying is that, especially with the adoption of all these new Neola policies, is that we're not gonna, for that one, gonna count the committee review specifically as the first board review. We're gonna have a full board discussion on each thing twice, because it'll be pulled out, or at least once, because it'll be pulled out of the consent
So
agenda.
this will be the first discussion of the zeros.
Yeah.
And then the next month, we'll have the second and the first of the other 3.
Well, unless all questions are answered tonight and we decide to approve as is or with an amendment, I mean, we could still approve them all tonight, not have to have them come back a second time. Right, because as long as they're pulled out of the consent agenda, and we can plan on having a discussion, we can still pass them tonight
we pulled them out
amended.
of consent, so we will need to approve consent with the other items, and then we'll have to vote individually on these.
On the policies.
ones that we've pulled out.
Okay,
So we're prepared to do that.
I mean,
Or
since they've
are
already
we-
been pulled out, we're already part of the way through.
Okay, but you just said that we're saying that the bylaws are first discussion, so if we're gonna stick to the second discussion, then we don't vote on them tonight, we
Exactly.
move them to April.
Exactly. Because you just said, according to this policy, we have to have 2 readings of the full board.
But you,
This would be the first one, the next one would be April 15th.
but then that applies to all policy changes, right? So I guess that's what we need to determine as a board, is does that first reading in committee count as the first review? And the second one counts for the full board? And again,
No, that's my point.
right,
A committee review is not the same as a board, as the first board or whatever. This is the board, a committee is not.
No, Tom is right, because in the past, we did do it where we would have the discussion during the
We were
board
on
meeting and
policy,
then
we were on policy.
yeah, and then, well, I was on finance, but now I'm on policy and I knew what happened before with policy. And we would have the discussion here as a board for then now me and Chris to have that discussion about what the whole board thought instead of just what me and Chris thought. So I could see where there's some confusion. So yeah, we can jump on top of that then, as a
Yeah.
board.
Yeah, so 2 readings, or that's the board decision,
Yeah.
then that's the board's decision, right? And I'm fine with
And that's
that.
consistent with policy, I mean, our policy, Neola
Right.
policy.
Right.
The one that is
So
adopted or
straightforward.
not adopted?
either way, our current policy says 2 readings, the Neola
Current
policy
one does.
says 2 readings.
By the board.
It does say by a meeting of the board, and so I guess it depends on how you define meeting of the board,
Right.
or board
That's the
meeting,
verbiage.
In,
yeah.
in some of the policies, they will call out of the entire board. They specifically
Right,
say
and they
that.
don't here,
And they
so that's
don't.
why I was
So
wondering.
that's, I think that's why Tina found in her previous life,
Mhm.
they were able to, they were able
When she got
to
away.
do that, right?
Sorry, slipped up.
Yeah, it said at any meeting of the board, it doesn't say the full board, the entire
So if
board, it says
at any
meeting of the board,
So we either have to change the policy or.
or
adhere to-
clarify.
Yeah.
So are we going to then say that any change in bylaws and policies that are not dictated by statutes or rules as per the Neola policy may be adopted or amended and repealed at any meeting? Do we want to add in there of the full board?
Yes, that's my opinion. Probably should vote on it.
Someone would have to make a motion when we come with discussion.
Yeah, and then, because the next step down says, provided the proposed adoption, amendment, or repeal shall have been proposed at a previous board meeting, and once proposed shall have been remained on the agenda of each succeeding board meeting until approved or rejected. So that implies 2 readings.
If I could add something, I do
Please.
think that we need to keep the heavy lifting, like, time to the PPC committee, only because our board meetings would be so long and so tiring. If we did what we did in the PPC committee meeting, and then also had a board meeting.
So how do I have the opportunity to ask questions when we're not allowed to discuss policy with other board members, because then it becomes a walking quorum?
Well, then, I mean, just like Tina had mentioned at a board meeting, instead of, you know, we don't have to go through all of them, but if you go through these policies on your own and you have questions, we
So
can
just
have
like
a
what we're
discussion.
So what, like what we're
Right.
doing tonight?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay,
That's
Okay.
definitely possible. That, just like Tina said, adding, possibly, you know, maybe
Okay,
adding
so the
something.
PPC does the heavy lifting.
just like they
It comes to the
did.
board for first discussion, so we can discuss as a group. And then the following month, it will be on the agenda for approval or non-approval.
By the full board.
Yes.
Okay,
And then the policy will be consistent with that.
okay. So would now be an appropriate time then for me to make an emotion to amend Neola Policy 131.1? And then we can approve that amendment, and then when we vote on all of the all the 0 series, that'll be included in that? And we can make a motion at the end of reviewing all the series saying with the amendments outlined.
I think it's
In the
real
meeting?
simple. All you gotta do is add the one word full.
But you're changing policy that hasn't been approved yet. I
Correct.
think you have to send it back to committee. The
Okay.
committee makes
Yes,
the
so-
change. It's
Okay.
brought back to the board next month. And then
Okay.
the board could vote.
Yeah, so
Okay.
we have to make a separate motion to send the bylaws back to committee.
Okay.
Correct.
But we can, but only the ones that we want them to adapt or change, right?
No, I think because we are changing our way of doing it.
Got it.
It
We'll have
needs
send
to
them all
just be
back.
the whole
Okay.
series.
Okay. So I think the only, correct me if I'm wrong, the only requested change that we're asking for so far, 1.1, to add in on the second paragraph at the, and I can show you right here, meeting of the full board. And that's page 12, second paragraph, policy 31.1. Okay. So, moving on to 132.1, compared to, Neola policies are great in that they're very succinct and brief, and some of our WASB policies are much longer. Part of the information that's in WASB policy 221 provides a lot more detail and suggestions about how to hire a district administrator. And I don't know if that necessarily needs to be included in policy, but I'd like to make sure that we keep those recommendations someplace, because I found them very helpful when we had to find a district administrator, is that
The
it
WASB policies.
the steps outlined in the WASB policy, because it gave us suggestions on what to do. And so I don't know if that's appropriate to actually have in policy, or if those guidelines should be someplace else.
Yeah, I think they can be added. We created a handbook for the board
Okay,
going forward for an onboarding, and I think that could be an element of that. It could be a document added to that. It will clarify that Neola really is a legal document. It
Right.
isn't meant to be like a handbook.
like an SOP.
And, right, and I think that's what WASB does. Sorry, my hip is
Yeah.
hurting, so that's why I'm standing. I just am, I want us to be really careful about the understanding of the difference between what policy truly is. Policy is not meant to be a step-by-step guide to what, you know, every individual place does. It is meant to be, this is the policy as is protected by legal, by state statute, and it covers a grand scheme. Now, if there is something very specific to your community, to your district, to your whatever, then you would add that. That is not a piece that's like specific to Heartland, right? Everybody goes through a process for hiring a district administrator. So is it a good recommendation and process? Sure, but it's not a policy.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does, and that's helpful because that's one of the things I noticed reading through the Neola policies is these are much more succinct and seem to be like specific rules to follow, but not necessarily tell you how to follow them.
Right.
Whereas the WASB has much more of that standard operating procedure or SOP that I just found missing here, so I just want to make sure we don't lose some of that SOP information.
Yep, absolutely.
So as long as it's
We'll
gonna.
always have them.
But as long as that's gonna be someplace that we're able to access,
Yep,
and if it's
absolutely.
going to be in a board handbook, that's not only available to new onboarding members, but to all current board members as well, so we have that information.
Sure.
Just wanna make sure we don't lose that, and then,
Absolutely.
okay, so no changes need to be made to that one.
So no suggested changes from
No
132.1?
Correct,
Okay.
okay. Sorry,
No, that's
I
okay.
told
That's
you,
what this is for.
sorry,
You don't have to apologize.
my
This is a
OCD
good
came out,
discussion.
okay. Administrative guidelines, 132.2, wait, no, maybe that was okay, let me see. Yeah, again, that just comes down to it was less prescriptive than our current policy. So, again, it's a rule, not an SOP, so I'm fine with that now. Yep, so no changes. 142.5, dealing with vacancies. So specifically, we had a vacancy to deal with, and one of the things that it states in our policy currently is that there should be a 14-day deadline for applicants to submit their application, letter of interest, to fill that vacancy. The current Neola policy 142.5 doesn't have any deadline in there. It just says the board shall seek qualified and interested candidates from the community and tells us how. And then applicants are to submit their notice of intent and interest to the superintendent, and then we're supposed to interview. But there's no, I don't know, again, if that's more of an SOP thing that doesn't need to be included in there.
Because what if you have an urgent fill and you
Okay.
you're looking for a school psych and you need one now and you've got three candidates, you're gonna call it
Sorry,
immediately?
this is for vacancies on the school board.
Oh, on the
School board, yeah,
okay.
so this is, because this is for board vacancy.
Okay,
So again, not being a policy person, I don't know if that's too much of an SOP or if we should include that in the policy.
You're saying that 2 week?
Yeah, the 14 days like we have in our current policy.
Okay.
I personally like the idea of having that in there so that we never have a board that tries to rush the process, that we make sure that there's always an appropriate amount of time.
Yeah, and it's transparent and everything.
Yeah, I think that's good.
I agree.
Okay,
Yep.
okay, so we'll send that one back to PPC then, and so that's 142.5.
and you wanted to specify 14 days?
14 days from the time that, that we put out notice that there's a vacancy until a 14-day deadline for candidates to submit their interest.
Okay.
Okay, so that one we're gonna send back. And then the bylaws and policies we're gonna send back. Okay, I'm down to 144.3. Which is conflict of interests. One thing that I noticed that was not in this policy, that was in the WASB policy, is there's no specific statement talking about any decisions that might affect our own child. And that's a discrepancy between the two. And interestingly, talking about, just thinking through something like GALS, I have a child that participates in GALS, so any decision about that contract would probably be best for me to abstain from, because it could specifically affect my child. So I wasn't sure if under conflict of interest, we wanted to include a statement in there to that effect as well.
I don't personally see that as a conflict of interest. What you're talking about is not limited to your child. It's for a group of students, and elaborate on it by using your child as an example. So it's not something specific that you're doing for your child.
And I think that we could make that case for like almost every single thing we have to vote on,
But
if we're parents in the district.
Oh, good point, it's just our
I
current
thought your
policy.
explanation regarding the gals very helpful.
Okay.
And we all have personal stories, and I admire you for bringing it out and helping us deal with the gals dilemma.
Okay. It was just something that's in our current WASB policy that's not in the board policy. So, I mean, in the Neola policy. So as long as the board's okay not having that specific wording in the new policy, I just wanted to make sure that there was a rationale for not including it in, or that the whole board was okay with not putting that in our conflict of interest policy.
Again, I will just add that from the Neola perspective, you start with the Neola policy and you look at our current policy. And if it isn't going to change the direction or intent of what the district is looking to do, then we left it at the Neola policy. Because otherwise, all we would have is WASB plus Neola policy in everything that we did. So we really, really focused on that Neola policy and added those pieces. Good governance, good board members abstain from voting on topics that they feel themselves personally influences a decision that it has. So Amy, in that situation, if that was something that you felt, you certainly could abstain from that vote, and that would be good governance on your part.
Sorry, are you saying that you and I disagree on that point?
No, we totally agree on that point.
Okay,
But if she felt that it was a conflict for herself, she could abstain. She didn't need your approval to do that, or board
exactly,
policy.
okay,
Okay.
that's a good way
So
to
we
put it.
don't need to specifically, I just wanted to make sure that, okay, that wasn't something, okay. I'm fine with that one. Oh, under policy 145, board member anti-harassment. In our current policy, we specifically mentioned Title IX and non-discrimination and a coordinator. Does that again come down to SOP versus policy?
It's covered in a different policy, and it names Amy because she is our Title IX coordinator for staff. So that's in a completely different section.
Policy, okay, okay. Maybe this only affects Chris right now, but policy 151 at the annual school district meeting, it doesn't specifically say who needs to take minutes. Our current policy does, that it's the clerk. I don't know if anybody cares about that.
Current policy does or current policy does not?
Our current policy states that you're responsible for taking the minutes of our annual meeting, because that's the one where the electors get to vote a chair.
Are you sure it's exactly the verbiage? Because the clerk is responsible that the minutes be taken, and that could mean either he directly or somebody that he subs it to.
Yeah, in our current board, it says pursuant to state law, the board clerk acts as the clerk of and records the proceedings of each annual meeting and special meeting. It doesn't say or appoint
Sure
somebody
it
else.
says.
It says pursuant to state law, the board clerk acts as the clerk of and records the proceedings. And I double checked in state statute.
That's the statute.
Then that should be in there.
Okay.
I mean, I think, is it?
Sorry, I don't know when I'm allowed to
Yeah.
speak.
No, please, anytime you have something to add, please.
What's the worst that could happen, right?
Clerk, there you go.
But under 171.3, where it talks about the clerk position, it
Right.
says what you're saying.
So do we want to be consistent in all of the policies to make sure they all say the same thing? So in other words, if policy 171.3 calls out the clerk's role as being responsible for taking minutes at the annual meeting, shouldn't that also then be included in the other rules for the annual district meeting? Or am I just being too persnickety?
I'm gonna suggest you get a legal opinion on it.
No, we're not gonna spend taxpayer money on other.
So one is in
Call up WASB.
One is in regard to the annual school district meeting and what that
Okay.
meeting is. The other one is in regard to the clerk's role. So either way,
It's in there.
it's in there, it details it. One is really more about the meeting itself and not about the clerk role, whereas the other is about the clerk's role directly.
Okay.
So I'm comfortable with where it's at, that doesn't mean anything, they're not my policies, but I'm just saying from, we live and breathe these, right? So,
Right.
you're welcome to discuss that however, but I'm just trying to clarify for the board.
I'm okay with it, Jeffrey.
Just leaving it as is?
Yeah.
I'm okay.
Okay.
Would you say it louder, Susan?
I'm okay with it.
With taking the minute?
No, we're leaving it the way that it is as described in Neola.
Okay.
I think, sorry, I
That
just
one's
have,
not requested.
that one's not requested.
Okay.
Sorry, some of my changes
Nope, that's
or
okay.
questions I now know are more of an SOP type of question and
No.
not a
It's
policy
fine, I'm just
question.
writing down until we determine if we don't, then I delete it.
Okay. Here you go. Another question as to whether or not it's SOP or policy. Policy 155, committees. Current policy specifies the number of board members on each committee and which committees we're going to have, as well as that the board president appoints a chairperson for each of those committees. Neola policy doesn't outline all of that. It just says that we will have committees. It doesn't tell us how many on each committee. It doesn't tell us which committees we need to have. And it doesn't mention anything about chair of the committees. So is that information and guidance we want to keep?
So a chairperson of a committee is not required.
It's not even mentioned in the Neola policy. So in the Neola policy, there's no mention of how many board members should be on each committee. There's no mention of which committees we need to have, because, and I understand, because that's left up to board discretion as to what we feel we need. But then there's also no mention of chair of each of the committees. So I don't know, I would recommend that we at least include in there how, the number of people on the committee, board members on the committee, so that's clear. Since which committees that we have are left up to the discretion of the board and what we feel the board's needs are, I'm okay not specifying which committees we're going to have in policy, so that we're not hand-tied by that. And then I would suggest we add in something there that the president then gets to appoint or recommend a chairperson for each committee. Unless, that's what I would suggest. I don't know if people have other thoughts.
My thoughts on the number I don't think are needed, given that we're a 5-person board. You can't have a committee without having 2, and if you have 3, you have a quorum. So I think it's, yeah, it doesn't make any sense. So you don't, you don't need to have a number specified. I don't know if in a different policy it talks about chairs. That I don't know. I don't know it offhand.
Nothing else that I remember in the, this is what I've got so far, in the 0 series.
Do we keep minutes of all the policy meetings now?
Yes.
Okay.
And they're posted in a couple of days, aren't they?
Pardon?
Don't we post them?
Yep.
The agendas are posted, the minutes are only saved in the archive for the
got it.
district and available upon request.
Got it, okay. President, I don't, the board, the chair thing, right, that's.
I think whatever you do, they all need to be posted, even if there's 2, because perhaps a 3rd, even a 4th board member might want to attend a particular meeting.
Yeah, they're all posted.
There should be that permissiveness.
And they are all posted?
Yeah.
Okay.
Excuse me?
And they are all posted?
Fine, yeah.
Okay.
Just for that possible, even though you don't have to post it for 2, if a board member might decide, hey, I wanna check out policy or finance, whatever.
So I have 0155, add president to appoint chair. Is that where we're at right now?
Yes.
If deemed necessary.
Well, that's just one thing that's in our current policy, that's in the WASB policy, that's not in Neola policy. So historically, we didn't really have, at least in my limited experience, didn't have chair people of committees, but this year we do.
I think it's a good point. I agree with you, because we were like, we have this in the policy, but we don't do it, and so now we're trying to do it, so we might as well
So
keep it in there.
155 we'll send back to talk about the president appointing chairs for the committees. Okay. policy 161, where we talked about Robert's Rules of Order.
161?
161. I was just curious as to why we chose option 1, which is a more formal one, rather than option 2, which was kind of in the drafty note that for small boards, that they suggested we follow Robert's Rules of Order with flexibility for procedure in small boards, because we're not quite as formal as larger boards. So the PPC committee chose the more formal option rather than the slightly less formal option that allows us to follow procedure in small boards. And I was just curious as to the rationale for that.
I'd have to pull it up everything. I don't have it.
What page are you on, Amy?
I'm on page 43. Because this specifically had to be struck out, and PPC had to specifically choose option 1 or option 2.
So these were they were recommended to us by the administration, just so you know the protocol.
Okay,
The PPC committee did not.
do not make those strikes.
We did not.
Oh, yeah, we do
Admin.
all of the striking and
Just so you
all
know,
of that.
all of that is
Okay.
All of that is done
Make
by
that-
That's
admin.
all brought to us just for review, so we did
Okay.
not actively.
So how do I tell what was struck out by admin versus changes that PPC made?
Didn't strike anything.
So PPC didn't make any changes at all?
Remember the email that I sent, and I said in that email, and I gave you that chart, and we talked about the chart, yep. And I said in there, this one's easy. This one's easy. PPC had no changes,
Okay.
right? So all the rest of those are working with
Got it.
our guy that helps us go through all of these. And then our 2 schools that we have designated, or they have designated to us that have gone through this process, are Holy Hill and Cedarburg. But we also look at our area districts, we look at Swallow and others just who have gone through this, just to make sure that, to see where we're at as far as alignment is concerned.
Okay.
That's what I can speak to on this
Okay.
piece, was the recommendation.
Okay.
And again, I think that these are just, so I mean, if there's something that you would like to say that we would consider, that's been struck out.
Okay. Well, just for ease of meetings, if we go with option 2 rather than option 1, where we can use Robert's Rules of Orders procedure in small boards, then we don't need to appoint a standing parliamentarian. Rather, we can the board president can appoint a parliamentarian if we have questions that arise.
Parliamentarian is the person that kind of like follows those rules of order.
So if we have a question, like I think in the past, that was Michelle, because she had that huge Robert Rules of Order book, and now more recently it's become Chris.
Right, because normally it's the clerk.
But, and I don't think that's in the clerk's description.
I
So,
mean,
if the rest of the board's fine with keeping it this way, I just wanted to make sure that we were aware that this is a change from our current policy, because our current policy says procedure in small boards.
Do you know what the difference is between the Roberts rule and the procedure small boards? 'Cause I think that as a policy, we should keep it Roberts Rule of Order, not the small boards. Even though we are a small board and act like a small board sometimes, it could cause some chaos.
So I will say this, it's interesting you brought this up, because this has actually been on my radar since our last meeting with 5,000 amendments and craziness. That I said to Tina, I'm like, we need to make a decision if we're gonna be more formal or if we're not going to be more formal. And then we also I wanted to I did wanna make an official designee who
Okay.
is more trained in the parliamentary stuff. So
Okay.
that was actually something that I was going to bring up. So for me, I guess, in my mind, I would prefer more formal, so that's why this wasn't a red
Okay.
flag to me, but obviously I hadn't shared my thoughts on that with you guys yet, so that's my take, is I would rather take a more formal approach, just to
Okay.
keep order, I guess.
Okay.
Tom?
I would disagree with you,
Okay.
because I think, and I've mentioned this on a couple of times, being on delegate assembly at the state convention for WASB, I have witnessed on several occasions. A year ago was absolutely the worst. It was a disgrace. It was an example of when you adhered to the letter more than the intent of Robert's rules. So that sandbagged it, and that came to light the problems that have been occurring, and it's there's 300 voting delegates there. That's what happens, it sandbagged the whole meeting. I've talked about it. So what we saw at our last board meeting was a real good lesson for us. It was a real good example. And I didn't want to say anything, but there are ways of ending it. We can make a motion to end discussion. There's other Robert's rules.
Right.
So we can either look at the letter of Robert's rules and let that happen to us again and again, or we can follow the intent of Robert's Rules of Order. So for example, if we can't resolve something in an orderly fashion, in a collegial way, which I think is preferable, we can always tighten up the rules, and then we'll see what happened as portrayed by last board meeting, and I don't want to see that happen again to this board.
Well, I think, and this goes along with our new member onboarding binder that we have created for our new people coming in May.
An improvement.
Yes, and myself, Amy, neither of us got any sort of training on Robert's Rules or parliamentary. Chris has taken classes on his own. That's also a training that I plan on providing the board when the new team comes together in May. So I think that's also an aspect to what happened last meeting as well. So Chris has
Madam Chair,
something,
right?
yeah.
So I do like the idea of keeping it. We can choose to be more lax, but it's very difficult to go the other way. So I understand what Member Harder is saying, but it's difficult to turn it the other direction. If you have formal agreements in place, you want to loosely work on something, you can, but the rules are there on purpose to make sure, like the last meeting, we ended up where we needed to be.
Right.
So if someone's making a motion, it shouldn't be a collective, hey, let's all figure out what the right motion is, because then we're not making a motion.
Yes.
If we're following actual procedure, then that doesn't happen. And that can actually direct where we end up. So I still agree that we should stay more formal.
Maybe.
While we were talking, I Googled Robert's Rules for Small Boards, and they said, here are the key differences between formal and informal procedures. And it doesn't mean we don't follow Robert's Rules. It just means, like, for example, board members do not have to stand or be recognized by the chair in order to speak or make motions. Board members may speak any number of times in a question, and motions to close or limit to debate are generally not permitted. I think, like we had the other night, but it gives us more flexibility. Votes can be taken initially by a show of hands. If putting questions to a vote, the chairman need not stand. The chairman can participate in debate just as any other board member. So I think if this is what just on a quick Google search tells us is the difference, just want to make sure we're recognizing when we say we want it to be formal, if we're going to truly follow Robert's Rules versus a more informal procedure for small boards, we understand what the difference is.
Chris?
The board can't determine whether to follow specific portions of Robert Rules. So just because it's identified in Robert's Rules, for example, the standing, it gives, if you read through it, it gives options. You don't have to stand, it's one of the options. Robert's Rules are also not statutory requirements, so you do not have to follow them, they are not legal. It is an adoption by the board to say this is how we choose to govern. So if we choose to deviate from that, as long as we're not breaking statute, we have that ability. The purpose, the sole purpose is to keep meetings efficient. Not always, it doesn't always work, but the purpose is to do that. For example, so we do not have conversation that goes all night, henceforth why the meeting last month had the motion to end debate with a final comment. So that's the advantage of following it. If you follow something like that, it's a little loose, then you try to introduce a motion or something that does help control. Now you're fighting, well, we don't normally do that, why are you making that motion? Don't do that, Ms. Tiffany.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's, we don't wanna be there either.
Okay.
So again, it's not a law, it's just a suggestion, and it's meant to make meetings efficient. And the other thing that I've learned from it is that it's more complicated and more difficult when you're in large groups. So what Tom's talking about, it's insane, it's a nightmare. Because they also use it to battle each other and trap each other, and it's nasty.
It's counterproductive to our overall goals.
Correct. Here, it's more just about organizing and trying to keep a meeting from going 4 hours. That's really what it's for. So I still like the idea of keeping it there, and then we can adjust.
Okay.
That's just my opinion, though, it's not gospel.
Jeffrey, you're the only one who hasn't said anything so far?
I mean, I kind of, still, in regard to the Roberts, I mean, I still think, I've already said it, I think that we should stick with Roberts rules.
Well, either way is sticking with Robert's rules, it's just whether or not we are allowed to follow some of the flexibility of section 49 in procedure for small boards. So either
Now I
way, we're
understand.
still
Okay,
applying, so.
I think that there should be flexibility. We already kind of do give ourselves the flexibility, whether that's stated right now.
She addressed you instead of the chair. Technically, that's not following Robert's rules, you don't address other members, you address the chair at all times. The chair then turns and recognizes other members. So if you wanna follow that formally, that's what you're doing, but we haven't adopted it to that level. But having some level of formality does help. That's my suggestion.
I like the formal aspect of it, and I think that it's there for a reason. So, I mean, so is the informal small boards. It's a matter of what we see the future of the board.
And I think if we end up adopting this, obviously, we're still gonna come together as a board to be trained in a specific way and determine, like he said, there still are alternative options within that formal thing. We can decide that as a group, as we onboard our new people.
So that so that board members don't always have to be recognized before they ask another board member a question? Because I think that kind of stifles conversation sometimes. But as long as that can be a discussion amongst the board.
Yeah, I think definitely.
Okay, then we can keep that as is, no need to send that back. Policy 166 on Neola about agenda. Last year, we went through a process based on community feedback, specifically asking how the public can add an agenda to the current policy. And that is then subsequently spelled out in Neola Policy 167.5. So I was glad to see that that was captured in there. So it's gonna be a little bit different for our community members. So they should take a look at that. Is currently, it can just be brought up before the board. Now it's more specifically outlined that you have to submit it in writing 10 days ahead of time, those types of things. But the other thing that's not spelled out in the Neola policy that we spent some time on as a board is how do other board members add an agenda item for consideration?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And the root is in 166, correct?
166, yeah. And just Tina and Amy, I just want to say a thank you for adding into policy 164 all that work that we did in making adjustments to participation via technology or remote access, because we just went through adjusting that and I saw that you copied and pasted that in here. So I wanted to say thank you.
Does anyone have anything to add to this?
I have to reread it.
Because the other thing is from the president's standpoint, Tiffany, is policy here 166 said the district administrator shall prepare and make available the agenda. And then individual board members may include items of agenda upon concurrence of the board president. But it doesn't necessarily say, our current policy said that you and the superintendent that the president and the superintendent make the agenda together. This more specifically says the district administrator shall make and prepare the agenda. And then that what we have to do, sounds like ahead of time, is that we have to ask the board president to put on any items that we might be interested in.
Can I speak?
Yes.
Yes, please.
So, item 15A, future board or committee action or discussion items, oftentimes that's where I know you, particularly Amy, have brought up a variety of topics that then get discussed and determined whether they get to the next board. We have talked about this, we talked about this fairly early on, that we created a practice back previous life, where a board member had a topic, and if they got another board member to sign off on, yes, we should explore this, and then that gets submitted to the president, and the president then can say, okay, this topic was brought forward, we direct the PPC committee to research this, or direct the administration to research this, or whatever. Or if it doesn't get a second signature, then it falls flat. But I think right now, we kind of go under at least this was my thought, was that because we have future board or committee action or discussion items that have been brought up, that we've brought back to the board meeting, that was the platform for that. But if we wanted something more formalized, we could do that.
But even that part of it's not included in this policy statement.
No, you're right, because it's not a practice right now, right? I'm just mentioning that these are practices, right, that we could do. As far as the agenda, yeah, we absolutely start here with administration, and then Tiffany and I talk about what do you think, should we add, should we not, what do you have for your agenda, what should I do for my agenda, and then that gets added throughout. So it's definitely a joint venture, but it absolutely does start the way this is spelled out.
Yeah, because according to this, unless I'm missing it, doesn't say anything about collaboration with the board president and coming up with the agenda.
Prepare and make available or deliver. The agenda shall list the various matters, upon the concurrence of the board president.
You're still on 166.
So you want it to specify that it's a joint venture?
Well, I think that's up for board discussion, right? Because right now, current policy does state that it's a joint venture between the two. Again, it's just a difference between policy and the way in which the board operates. What
page is it?
Page 49.
So the sentence that you're referring to, the individual board members may include items on the agenda upon the concurrence of the board president.
So there's two concerns. One, it says the first sentence says the district administrator shall prepare and make available an agenda prior to each meeting. It doesn't say anything in there about with collaboration with the board president.
That could be very literal. That her staff or that person's staff and that person has to prepare and make it available. The board president doesn't actually type it out.
Well,
that's how I read it anyway.
But it doesn't include, so then where in here does it say that the board president can add agenda items? It doesn't.
It says individual.
Madam President, I sense we're starting to drift off a little bit from a board policy overview into some of the finer but important details that should be covered in the policy meeting rather than usurp the policy committee tonight. So I don't know how many more of these that are important.
How many more do you have, Amy?
Yep, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 8 more after this one.
And then from a personal standpoint, I was really crunched tonight to attend, and I'm trying to do my best, but I at some point soon, I'm gonna have to excuse myself.
So I get that. At the same time, if we're going to pass policy, there needs to be an ability for us to ask questions. And since I'm not on the PPC committee, and I can't ask questions about this to other board members through email or other forms of communication, because then it's a walking quorum, when is the opportunity to ask these questions?
At the policy meeting, committee meeting.
So then if a board member has questions, so now I have to sit down and prepare for the PPC meeting as well, in addition to the board meeting?
Pretty much exactly what you're doing. I would recommend, suggest that exactly what you're doing is all valid. I'm not discrediting any of this. I find it very interesting, and but at some point, and you're on finance, it's almost like we are usurping the policy meeting beyond asking questions as a board, but getting into these details that really should be looked at in appropriate depth at the meeting. And I believe there's 2 people on policy. The meetings are always posted for the reason that you might have questions, good questions that deserve good answers, or maybe there's oversight or something like that, that should be looked at in more depth at the policy committee. That's pretty much what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, look, the questions are good. I find them very interesting, and you've put a lot of work into this. It's just, it's almost like you're running the policy meeting here, and this is not a personal thing. It's just, these are things that are very normal, that just need to be worked through. I've been on policy probably for 10 years, and I agree with what you're saying, but I would hope that you could bring your expertise to the policy committee.
So if the policy committee meets during a time where I'm not at work, I can do that, but quite often policy meetings are set up at a time where I have clinic.
I get
So
that.
I can't do
That's
that.
a logistics thing that would be
Right.
inappropriate for me to try to tell you.
Right, and so, and the other issue is then per policy, if we're going to notice a meeting where there's gonna be a quorum present, we have to have so many days lead time. Well, quite often, because I work, I'm reviewing stuff over the weekend, and we don't get things, with sufficient notice where I can have more than like 2 weekends before the PPC meeting. So I don't know.
I can't give you an answer to that. I'm sorry.
Okay.
What's your recommendation, Amy?
Yeah. I need to be able to ask questions before I vote on something, because by voting as a board member, I've said I've read and agreed with all of this. And there needs to be a way to ask questions. I mean, I email Amy and you when I ask questions that are specific to information that you provide. But I can't ask questions of other board members outside a board meeting because of quorum issues.
So why don't you just email us and ask us your questions when you go through it like this? Because all of these strike-throughs and all of this work we've done with PPC. We've gone through it with them. So if you ask us, then maybe we can give you an explanation, at least to the majority of the things that you're asking tonight are
They're
not.
excellent.
They're great questions, but they're not changing the essence of what it is we are doing, right? It's not changing the outcomes for kids. It's not changing any of that. All it's doing is being like really, really clear, which I understand, but I think we could probably
Do better
shore a lot of
justice.
this up and not have all of this time. If when you go through and you have your very organized notes and your pieces, especially because what you're addressing are pieces that we did. Right? So talk to me and then we can get those worked out and then we can bring it to the full board so that the majority of your questions, and if there's something in here that you're like, oh, or I can even say, I think that's a decision for the board. And I tell you very honestly on a regular basis. So if it's something that I think the whole board needs, then that comes back, right? Then that's what you pull out of that policy. But a lot of these questions you're asking tonight are really easily clarified by either they're really, really specific, which is not the intent of the policy, because it's not intended, right? Or it's not changing the scope and sequence of what it is that we're doing.
So I hear what you're saying, and I'm happy to do that moving forward. Part of it is that if, I just want to be real certain that, because we hear time and time again, the most important thing the board does is develop policies which drive the district. And you yourself have said that you're a policy person, and if there's ever a question, you look at policy. So if there's a difference between one policy and the other, I want to make sure that somebody reassures me it was a deliberate omission and the rationale for why whatever we were doing before is not specifically included in the new policy.
And I think I said that early on when I said we focus on Neola policy as our first order, and we share it up against whatever we are doing with WASB. We choose that if it's not changing any kind of the scope and sequence of what we do as educators or a board or a community, and it doesn't miss the values of this community and this district, then we're not gonna add the WASB, because otherwise you in essence have two full policies within one policy.
So,
and paying for two.
Right.
Well,
or maybe only paying one.
So I think when it comes to things such as personnel, education, curriculum, education of students, that's one thing. But these are board bylaws. This is what provides us guidance on how to do the board work for everything else.
Excuse me.
So I think it's a little bit different.
Could you kind of pull this together, please?
Yeah,
All
I'm
right,
not
so
trying to
here-
argue,
okay.
I'm just.
So you have eight more questions, essentially, or questions on 8 more policies. Are there any ones that you feel absolutely have to be heard by us that you don't think Tina could answer?
Or that are extremely time sensitive.
Because what I'm gonna suggest is, we still need to vote on consent, and then we need to vote on moving the bylaw policy approval to April. So that will be our second discussion on it. We're not making decisions tonight. We're still, as a board, going to have discussions on these policies. So is it necessary for us to go through each of these?
So I can email my questions to superintendent, business manager, and then do I include the PPC committee to make sure they're aware of my questions as well? Or what would you recommend so that we don't get into a walking quorum?
Do you trust that as your superintendent, I will share it with the PPC board members?
Yes.
Then I would just send it to myself and my business manager.
And I'm just gonna say, I did email you my questions about G, and I never heard back from you.
Let me focus on when that came.
So it was just today, but if you're gonna, but I mean, I got the policy, we got the consent agenda and everything in it just Friday afternoon, right? So I'm gonna review them over the weekend.
Sure.
And I don't expect you to be doing work over the weekend, so I email you a question and that was a small one, right? So for something bigger like this, obviously, I'm not gonna email you on Monday, 20 questions about bylaws, so.
Okay, so
we're gonna.
You've got 8 more. Which ones do you not want to email about?
No, all the rest can be, I can do all the rest through email, because it's all gonna be coming back to the board. As
Okay.
long as we're not approving these tonight,
We are not.
then I'm fine.
Okay.
So just so that I can keep track of the
Yes.
notes, we're not gonna be voting to send 131, 142, 155, send back. The whole lot is going back.
And I'll
you will
send-
send her comments to the administration, who will bring it to the PPC meeting.
Yes.
We will discuss it, we will make said changes if necessary, and then bring it back to the board one more time
Yes.
for discussion
And
and approval.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay.
with the exception of the ones that we've already indicated that we wanted the PCP committee to address.
Correct, which is the
Okay.
131.1, 142.5, and 155.
Yeah.
So do you have any more specific right now, or are you just going to?
I'm gonna save the rest of your time, and I will just email to the administrative team.
Okay. I'm going to make a motion to approve consent agenda items A, B, C, D, F, H, and I.
Second.
All in favor?
Okay.
Aye.
You said A, B, C, because he's still typing
We're
D.
eliminating
Sorry,
E and
I'm
G,
sorry, I'll go
correct?
slower.
We're eliminating
Who
E and
seconded?
G.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Items, what are they now?
A, B, C, D, F, H, and I.
Thank you. All right, now you ready to vote? Or you already did?
Yeah,
Sorry.
yes, Jeffrey seconded it and,
We did vote.
A, B, C.
We haven't voted yet.
So E,
Kristen,
I did not vote.
yeah,
No, I haven't voted yet.
Aye. Thank you.
okay. All right, motion passes to approve consent agenda.
Aye.
Yeah, you're.
No, I didn't vote.
Oh, okay. All right,
5-0.
all right, I make a motion to move series 0000 bylaws policy to the April meeting for second discussion and final approval.
7.
All in favor?
Discussion? Is there discussion?
No one has discussion.
Oh, I just wanted to make sure
Yeah.
you're taking it straight there, you're
Yep.
not sending it back to committee.
Well, it
Well,
should go
yeah,
committee.
because you'll have a committee meeting before the next
All right, so
board
we
meeting.
don't have to vote to
Yeah.
move it back to committee?
No.
All right.
And then, actually, I would make a motion
Who
to,
seconded that one? Oh. And I didn't vote yet.
Tom did.
sorry.
Tom seconded.
Aye.
Motion passes.
And then I'll make a motion to approve consent item G, because I think all the questions were answered.
I'll second.
Hold on.
Go for it, Joe.
To approve item G,
Item G in the consent agenda.
thank you.
7.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay.
Did I second it?
You got it.
Thank you.
Let me know when you're caught up, Chris, and then I'll move on.
Good enough.
All right.
Okay.
Good enough to where I can fix them later.
Okay, superintendent report.
Yes,
What's
just a couple of.
excuse me, what's the status of E then?
It's going back to,
Yeah,
PPC.
we just voted on it going back to,
E or G?
okay, G was approved. E is moving back to PPC
Okay,
and will be
alright.
on the April agenda to have a second discussion and approval.
Thank you.
Just a couple of updates here. I guess I want to acknowledge the community of Heartland. Just some really great, positive, hard, but good feedback on the transportation. And so I just appreciate the class and respect and goodwill and good nature of the responses. Because it's a concern for all, and that's what I felt from every email that came in, so thank you for that. Wanted to just give a quick update here, and obviously we'll continue to update the community. But the next location that we are looking at is KE and Maple. This area did not have a unusually hazardous zone, but the police were looking at this intersection this week. Next up, we have River Reserve, both sides of KE, which encompasses the following intersections and crossings: Maple Avenue and Highway KE, North Shore Drive, North Shore and South. River Reserve Drive and Highway KE, North Shore Drive, crossing from the south side of KE to the north side of KE, North Shore and South. Lindenwood Drive and Maple Avenue corner, crossing from River Reserve into Hartridge, all three schools. And then also Old North Shore Drive at both ends of Highway KE and all that it encompasses. Taylor's Woods Road, Conservancy Drive, Lakeside Road, Yorkshire Trace for both North Shore and South. So we continue to bring these updates, and as we find out what Waukesha Sheriff's Department has to say, we will continue to keep the community informed. So that's where we're at currently. Next, we have an update on summer school. So we are finalizing the summer school booklet. We're super excited about that. We are hoping to have that out next week, by the end of the week. So be sure to sign up and make sure you attend, and there's all kinds of really fun and exciting new things going on there. We have continued our rebrand outside of the vlog and the website and the newsletter. You may have heard a radio spot this last week, and so that feature that came out on Friday and will continue for the next 2 weeks. Additionally, every family in the district will be receiving a letter in the next week along with a decal. That is Hartland-Lakeside School District's new logo and little car decal. So we're excited about sharing that out. Please put that on your vehicle and share, I just want Hartland-Lakeside to be the first thing that people see when they're driving around town. Attendance update, not necessarily an update about how our attendance is doing, but a fun activity that we're implementing for the month of April. We are looking at doing a staff and students perfect attendance month, and we will do that weekly, and then everybody will be entered into a drawing for the end of the month. So we're really trying to make that fun and exciting for our staff and our students. And then we also, for the month of April, are partnering with Chartwell's, which is our food company. And we are doing Italy. So we're gonna focus on Italian food, and every student will have the opportunity to taste a little Italian food. We're gonna have a little Italian music, some culture that goes along with that, and decorating each of the cafeterias in Italian fare. And we've really had a lot of fun. Michelle's really kind of spearheaded that mission. So we're super excited to see what the month of April brings from Italy and attendance. That's all I have, thank you.
Great. Okay, we're moving on to Director of Business Services report.
Monthly financial report. February looks great. For Fund 10, the general operations, funds that we received in February was the second tax levy deposit of over just $2.6 million. So this is 73% of that tax levy now, which is great, which is why you see a large surplus now, is because we've gotten the majority of that tax levy. Interest on our money market, MaxSafe, still doing great at 5.54%. So we did have interest come in at over just 21,000. Expenses.
Based on what deposit amount, approximately? Just approximately.
6 million.
Thank you.
So for expenses, they should be around 67% of the budget at this time, and the district looks great and is on budget in Fund 10. Fund 27, which is special education, revenue that came in was our special ed aid of just over 99,000. We did get some Medicaid reimbursements of just over 13,000, and then we did have that interfund transfer from Fund 10 to Fund 27, which was about 115,000. Expenses look good and on budget except 300. Our purchase services is over by 1.85%. When I reviewed the detail, there's no concern at this time. It looked like it was due to some software and things that we needed, but nothing that I'm concerned at this point. But I will be talking to the director's special ed as well, just to make sure there's nothing else that I'm not aware of. Fund 46, that is our capital improvement. Again, that's just the interest coming in at that 5.54%. Fund 50 is food service, and revenue coming in is the food service deposits as well as that aid that we receive. Expenses are related to Chartwell's or lunch account balances. And then Fund 80 is the daycare, so that is just revenue and expenses on their side, and they look like they're tracking well as at this time. Is there any questions? Okay. The second thing I have, sorry, my computer slept on me here, is the lawn service contract. This is the second year of a 5-year MOU that we entered, obviously last year with LW Landscape and Snow. We had gone to a full RFP process last year. When I spoke to Greg, our Director of Buildings and Grounds, he said service is great, so he'd like to continue.
It is up over, or it has increased from last year by $2,800 total, but that does run from May to November. So I am asking the board to review and approve this so that we can sign this contract and have him start cutting the grass again soon. Are there any questions at this time?
Are you requesting a motion now?
Yes, this is one that will have to be,
Yeah, we have to make a
Renew
decision.
the- I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we do have to make a decision.
Are you suggesting paying in full or paying it monthly?
paying monthly, he does bill monthly.
So I'll make a motion to approve the lawn service contract renewal.
Second.
Discussion?
Tiffany, you mentioned this morning that your lawn care company increased. This is about a 10% increase. Is that what you've seen?
Oh, I think mine was more.
Okay,
It was ridiculous.
okay, okay. So this is not out of keeping?
No,
Okay,
no.
that was my only question.
Okay, any more discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Okay. Motion passes. Service contract for the lawn is approved.
Thank you.
Okay. Future board or committee action or discussion items. Well, I already spoke to it, but we are going to be having an executive session to go over Tina's goals and whatnot.
When?
April.
Fine.
Anybody else?
Kind of a follow-up question from last month's similar agenda item is both Chris and I had talked about discussing or adjusting public comments, and I wasn't sure when that was gonna be put on an agenda. And I think there was agreement that we wanted to rediscuss public comments, or similar to what Neil said earlier today, some kind of listening sessions. Or was that Matt? That was, yeah, Matt, about having a fall and spring session. So just wanted to make sure that didn't fall off the radar, as things sometimes do. And then the other question that I've been stewing on is, how do we as a district and a board want to handle families that have been paid to ride?
Excuse me.
Up till now. Well, we have those 25 families that we're paying the $745 for pay to ride, but not all.
Of that group originally.
Correct, but we weren't billing everybody pay to ride. So is there some kind of, do we want to have as a discussion point in the future, how we want to offer some kind of compensation?
My position would be yes.
But we gotta,
It's
this is
just an agenda item.
I get it.
Right, but we can't discuss it right now.
You're right,
Okay.
but, so.
The only modification is that we keep locking into that high amount of $754, whatever it is, based on Arrowhead's cost. And I'm not sure we should continue to assume that.
But we're not, we can't talk about this right
I
now.
get it, I'm just,
Okay, well, then we gotta stop discussion.
I understand.
So is there agreement of that being a future agenda item?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
You got it? Tom? Chris?
Fine.
Okay.
okay.
Okay. PPC meeting, April 4th at 5 o'clock.
So all good, Chris?
I believe so. April 4th, 5 p.m.
Yeah.
Yes.
May I just suggest one thing?
So,
With regarding to schedule that, Amy brought up a very legitimate concern that if she has some, input, is there any way, and is this a good time that you could coordinate your schedule with the planning of this upcoming policy meeting?
It's not, because I have a full day of clinic on Thursdays, and then I have meetings from 4 to 5 on Thursdays.
But is this something you could reconcile tonight with the policy meetings.
So I appreciate the outreach. Let's see how it goes
I'm trying
with
to help.
submitting. No, and that's why I said I appreciate the outreach. Let's see how it goes with submitting questions ahead of time to the administrators and the feedback and see how that process goes.
Sure.
But if we need to make adjustments to that,
So all I'm
specifically while we're doing the
suggesting is,
bylaws.
number one, you
Yeah.
have valid concerns, you did
Yeah.
mention that trying to reconcile your schedule, I
Yeah.
get that. And all I'm saying is that if you anticipate questions along this line that perhaps are not resolved at an administrative level, when the policy meeting is being considered to be scheduled.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
And that gives me some leeway to then ask for that
all I'm trying to say,
consideration.
yeah.
So thank you.
And I will say from a transparency aspect, we did hear all of your comments and notes and at the policy meeting as well. No, I'm not saying it like you should apologize. Wait, I'm just letting you know that it is related to us.
Thank you.
So,
Oh, from the 6,000 series,
You got it, yeah.
Could I just ask that I have at least 24 hours to respond to an email, please, going forward?
Then it would also then be helpful if we got the agenda with all the supplements more than just Friday. Because then all that gives us is that weekend to send you emails and questions, and I, by rights respecting work-life balance, should not expect an answer back over the weekend. So I think that's perfectly acceptable, but then we need to get the board packet more than Friday
I
morning.
think we're getting it as soon as you can. I mean, honestly, we're doing, so
Some
we
things
can
are
talk
not-
offline about it.
I'll just say,
Amy,
when I started
I'm
my
gonna
first
suggest
year,
some
I got
things
it
are
on
not
Sunday
known.
night. And then we moved it
Right.
Sunday night before
But
Monday.
then I can't email questions
No,
ahead of time.
I'm in agreement with you.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, when I brought that up, when I was first on the board, I was like, this is crazy, Sunday night is impossible. I think we moved it to a Thursday was like our general thing. So I don't know if we can maybe decide on an actual day to be consistent, or if we need to give more leeway to the fact that different agendas have different amounts of things and it takes longer or shorter time to pull packets together. So,
The dilemma that I believe we all face, especially administration, is that there are any number of things that are not known to the last minute. So you try
Correct.
to have everything in order before you put it on the agenda. As opposed to, you know what, do I meet the deadline or do I postpone something because I don't have complete data and then postpone it a whole month? It's a thankless. You understand?
Amy?
Can we maybe then I'm fortunate enough that Fridays I don't typically work. So if I don't have other stuff going on, I can start to tackle this on a Friday and submit questions before, potentially so they can be answered not over the weekend, respecting people's work-life balance. Can we maybe start to consider submitting as much of the board packet as possible, by Thursday morning, so then people who don't have the ability
It's not the
to,
board packet then.
well, but as much as they can, so at least we can start working through the process. So for people like Chris or anybody, or Tiffany, who have other work that they need to do during normal working hours, have at least one night, so Thursday night, where they could start looking to submit questions to Tina, so then Tina still has 24 hours to turn around and answer the question before the board meeting. I just don't know how we're going to abide by that 24-hour request if we're getting the board packet when we get it.
I agree with you. My opinion is I could get frustrated also by waiting longer, but the alternative, unfortunately, sometimes is we couldn't quite get it ready by Thursday night, Friday night, and therefore it's just gonna have to be put off a month. I think that's the two-edged sword that we have to reconcile.
Okay.
It's no informed.
Finance committee,
Yeah, finance committee,
Okay.
April 8th, 11:15.
yep.
All right. School board meeting, April 15th, 5:45. Executive session, 6:30, open session.
Sounds good.
Just with all the discussion, I wanna thank Amy and Tina for all the work that you've been doing. It's been a ton. Just the policy committee alone has been somewhat overwhelming. And to do that in addition to everything else that you two fine individuals do is incredible. So I wanted to just publicly thank you for all the work that you're doing. It's noticed. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
All right, I move to adjourn this meeting at 9:15.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are done. Okay.
Tom, did that you second?
Have a nice night, Tina.
Yep, you too.